My name is Lucia Alves. After many decades in the entertainment industry, I have decided to create, in partnership with my husband, Cine Tribe. This is a haven and an alternative to Hollywood. I'd like to welcome you and make a little brief introduction. Henk Keilman is a wonderful European adventurer, writer, creator, manifester, and he's with us today to talk about his book, this amazing book called Intelligence or Chaos. So tell us, please, about this book and what brought you to actually write this book.
All right. Well, the title is, it's related to the fundamentals of, you could say, the existential questions of life, the fundamentals of the universe, where it came from, whether the universe itself originated from a totally chaotic situation, without there being a supreme source of intelligence and information, or is it something that is coordinated by intelligence and arose from intelligence and created and managed and coordinated by intelligence and information. That's the, to simplify it, does God exist or not? Because that's in the end, we can use very fancy words and say intelligence and consciousness and so on, which are all valid words, but in the end, they boil down to one thing, which I personally believe is the most important question that a human being and humanity can ask itself. Does God exist or does he not exist? And the implication is that if he exists, then the universe is run by intelligence. If he doesn't exist, it's originating not from intelligence, but from chaos.
Sure.
Or even worse, from nothingness, which is what many scientists today believe, that the universe actually came out of the Big Bang, which is of course a theory that I have no problems with. Sure. The Big Bang arose from the singularity, which is a pre-universe state of pure, an infinitesimal small point with infinite temperature, infinite compression, beyond time and space, etc. And then the question is, where did the singularity come from? And many famous scientists like Stephen Hawking, for instance, is of the opinion that it came out of pure nothingness.
Which is not possible, really. How can something
right.
come out of nothing?
In the realm of the inconceivable, even the impossible may become possible. That's their way of thinking.
Yeah.
But so anyway, the question is which scenario, which narrative is true, and is there evidence one way or the other? The argument that I've put forward is that yes, the narrative is that it arose from intelligence and it arose from consciousness. The universe was indeed in the end created by God, an intelligent, infinitely intelligent, powerful being. And the indication for that and the scientific proof of that is what scientists have discovered is what is called the fine-tuned universe. The fact that fundamentally the universe is run by four forces: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. And what scientists have discovered over the last 30, 40 years is that these forces, they have values, but they are also constants. And a constant in physics is something, it's a force that has no source, it has no known origin. In a way, they're absolute, they're just there, and nobody knows where they came from, they're just there. but these constants, they just happen to have the exact right values in relationship to one another so that the universe could exist at all. And then we're talking about the relation between gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and the weak nuclear force. For instance, the existence of an atom, an hydrogen atom, which is the smallest atom in the chemical in the periodic table, is held together by these four forces, and they exactly are perfectly attuned to one another, so that an atom, an hydrogen atom, which was possibly created at the time of the Big Bang or just thereafter, has been existing for billions of years in a stable manner, whereas the atom itself is not at all in itself a stable configuration. It's held together by forces that are very delicate. And of course,
mathematical affair, really. It's actually mathematical in a way.
Yes, yeah. These exactly. These are mathematical equations. The values of these forces, they are expressed in mathematical numbers and equations, and the relation they have to one another is extremely delicate, which means that if gravity would be slightly stronger or slightly less, or if the strong nuclear force would be slightly stronger, slightly less, you would see that the whole universe would just end up in a mess. It wouldn't exist at all. It would collapse into a huge black hole, or it would just explode or implode. But you end up at a non-workable mess, not the kind of universe that we are living in right now, where everything is working. You know, atoms are working, molecules are working.
Perfectly,
we are talking on the phone right now, and the only reason we are able to do that and communicate is because all the material elements that enable our communication are basically stable, and they are acting in a predictable way, because these forces, they are just the right forces to make everything happen. So this, not only that, these four forces, they were created at the time of the Big Bang, not over billions of years of evolutionary development, but they were instantaneously,
manifested,
in the fraction of a second,
manifested like that.
They were manifested, and wow. This is what is inexplicable. There's no explanation for it, how that could have happened. You know, mathematicians have made calculations. What is the probability that something like that could have happened by chance at the time of the creation of the universe? And the number is just so staggeringly big in terms of the impossibility. The number is 10 to the power 10 to the power 123. I mean, the number is so huge that if you would spell it out, the number itself would fill up the universe. So it's not just,
yeah, it's a joke, right? It's almost like there's a joke there to be loud.
Yeah, I'm sure some stand-up comedians make some really funny jokes about it. I haven't thought of one, but maybe one will come around.
No, but I'm thinking manifestation itself is like playing a joke on the brain that is trying to limit and pinpoint and mathematically, you know, and everything, because I think the humankind, and it's a natural thing, is that we want to figure things out. The mind wants to figure out and classify. It's a natural thing. We want to know. That's the
exactly. We are conscious beings, and one of the functions of consciousness is what we call intelligence, the ability to understand and the desire to understand things. You know, so that's
the joke is on the mind in a way, because it's like, okay, you can't really figure this out with your mind, and and then the mathematic equation is so evidently humongous that even the mathematicians using the brain, they might, it's the joke is there. It's like, okay, you can figure all this out, but the equation shows that there's something more, right?
Yeah. Well, what the equation shows and what the number shows is that it's very improbable, or very, very, very improbable. It's just totally 100% impossible. According to, in statistical theory, the number 10 to the power minus 50 is considered to be like a turning point. If anything is smaller in terms of the chance of it happening is smaller than 10 to the power minus 50, it already is considered to be impossible. And what
Right.
we're talking about here is 10 to the power 10 to
It's
the
over the
power
charts.
123. So it's infinitely larger impossible. So it's even more and more impossible. So there's no way
I
that
love
could
it.
have happened. It's just
Sure.
out of the question.
Correct.
So that's chaos. Chaos is out of the window. You know, chaos is not the solution. Chaos is not the explanation. That's why the book is called Intelligence or Chaos. It's either chaos
Or
with
intelligence.
an impossible improbability attached to it, or it's designed by an intelligent conscious being that runs the universe on the basis of information and intelligence. And
Beautiful.
it's the only explanation. You know, there's only two options. It's either created by
Right.
chance or it's created by intelligent guidance. There's nothing in
Sure.
between. You know, there's not a little bit of chance and a little bit of
Sure.
intelligence. No, it's either
Sure.
one or the other. Totally.
So I was looking at the I didn't have time to read completely the whole book, but I read the first two chapters. And I think it's a beautiful thing if you can just like explain. Chapter 3, which is the next one I'm going into, is
Yeah.
materialism. So materialism, you call matter is the only reality. So the
Yeah.
materialistic mind will think, okay, it's only matter, there is nothing else. How did you approach that subject?
Yeah. Well, see, the foundation of the chaotic explanation for the origin of the universe, which is basically what is still the scientific paradigm. You know, the universe came with the Big Bang. Big Bang came out of, you know, in a singularity. Singularity just nobody knows, but it came out of nothing. So in the end, it's just pure nothingness, you know, and pure chaos. But the essence of chaos is that there are two realities. There's emptiness or void, and there is particles, you know, subatomic particles in this instance. So the chaos theory is that these subatomic particles, they are fundamentally disconnected from one another. They're floating around in empty space, and sometimes they collide and bump into one another, and sometimes by accident they create an configuration that's stable and that might perpetuate itself and become more stable. And if you do that over a period of billions of years, eventually you get human beings and a human brain, you know, which is the most complex thing on earth. So that's the chaotic explanation, that
Right.
matter and void, and
Sure.
and they are fundamentally disconnected. The only thing that there are is a few fundamental laws, you know, like Newton's laws. There is the law of action versus minus reaction. You know, when two objects collide, they will transfer kinetic energy and they will change their movement as a result of it. Another element of what you call mechanistic materialism is attraction or repulsion. Although that's already more difficult to explain, because when there is attraction, for instance, gravity, what is causing gravity? Newton discovered gravity as a force, but he couldn't actually explain it, because even gravity, it's not a material thing. It attracts material objects, and it's related to mass and it's related to matter, as Einstein explained. Einstein explained that basically gravity is the curvature of time-space caused by the presence of a very massive object like a planet, for instance. But even that doesn't really explain it, because, you know, if something is time-space, if that's curved, but space is supposed to be empty. You know, even Einstein originally thought that space was kind of an empty thing. But then he realized, no, it's not empty, it's full. It's actually an energy field of itself called the time-space continuum. So here we are already entering the realm of the non-material. Matter is already
Sure.
superseded by something that we call an energy field or the time-space continuum, which is not actually material. So already at that point, and that's when I'm explaining in the third chapter, that the whole idea of mechanistic materialism, being atoms moving around at random in the infinite void, that's already out of the window.
Sure.
First of all, the realization that the interaction is not just regulated by their physical contact. There is another force that causes attraction or repulsion. And what that force is, well, it's not material particles. It's there in space, but we don't really know what it is. So
So
prior to Newton, the idea was that energy is kind of a byproduct of matter. Since Einstein, with his famous formula E is mc squared, he turned the thing around. He said, actually, matter is a byproduct of energy. But then the question arises, what is energy? So then you come to the level of quantum physics, where
sure.
they explain that energy is really the foundation of the universe. And
And is
that
the
energy,
energy, so just so I understand, because of my little brain, is that the energy, is the energy like manifested in the ether? Is like,
no, it's even more in the ether. It was considered in 19th century physics. Scientists thought that there was something like a very subtle substance called ether, which in a different way, and if you look at it from a Vedic point of view, does exist. But no, energy is even more subtle than that. Energy is actually space itself. They're no different.
wow,
It's so incredibly subtle that it is the foundation of what we call space. It is the foundation of what we call reality. Now, of course, then the biggest mystery is that, is this energy dumb or is it intelligent? And coming back to the original question, if we look at the organized complexity in the universe, and the way that the universe itself came about and the way it's functioning, we must come to the conclusion that energy not only is inconceivable in terms of what it is, but it is also unbelievably intelligent. It has a capability of doing things that are just for us as mortal human beings unimaginable.
exactly. We can grasp it. That's I think that's why it's wonderful to have this conversation, because I think so many people really want to know, but it's so, when you get down to like quantum physics, and it takes so much research and so much time, and people are just
Yes.
rushing around. So I think this book is going to be a great tool for many people, because you really bring into cutting into pieces a huge pie to like make it simple to understand. So the next chapter, then you talk about Darwin, the theory of evolution. Then you talk the defects of materialism, and the origin of existence has to be simple. So just overall, and the imperfect the imperfect universe.
Yeah.
So you go into many chapters, 14, and you reach a place where I'm very interesting to hear about is, why is there something rather than nothing? Why,
Right.
I think it's a great question. Why is there something rather than nothing? Because then we can put aside all the, like, okay, the nothingness and the emptiness and the Brahman idea,
Right.
and just so tell us why is it?
Yeah. Well, this is, and even this is another existential question. One is, how did the universe come about, and how can it be as complex and still function? And, can that happen by chance, or is it organized through intelligence and information? So that's the first point. Even more fundamental, you can ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing? And from an atheistic point of view, this is a very difficult question to answer, because if you look at the universe is incredibly complex, and it exists already according to the scientific Big Bang cosmology theory, it's been existent for 13.7 billion years, and it may exist for another, 10, 20 billion years, but the understanding is that eventually the universe will cease to exist. There is a theory that in the end it will die as like a freeze death, because every atom, because the expansion of the universe will go on and on and on until eventually every atom will be ripped apart and be reduced to practically zero. And it will merge into infinite space, kind of, and disappear. So you can ask the question, if the universe was created by itself, and in the end its only purpose is to disappear by itself, and in the process of existence, it's going through the most tumultuous, violent changes, from explosions to supernovas to black holes to one destruction after another destruction. It's a big mess, you know, from beginning to end. Why would the universe want to create itself? What's the purpose of it? There is no purpose.
Yeah, if
You
it's
know,
just going to be a bunch of explosions.
Even Stephen Hawking said, for instance, the unified field theory, is it so powerful that it's therefore like a certain mathematical equation is powerful, therefore the universe decides to create itself in order to manifest its mathematical beauty, or you know, something like that. But there is no purpose to it other than existence itself. So from an atheistic point of view, it's kind of nonsense, because you know, efficiency is extremely important. I mean, even in the universe, if you look at the laws of nature, things don't change unless they are forced to change. So there's always an element of efficiency and effectiveness. So from a fundamental point of view, non-existence would be much more efficient and more effective than existence, because it's a lot of effort that leads to nothing. So you better not create and better just stay nothing. So that's from an atheistic point of view. I talk about it from the point of view of effectiveness. Now, if you look at it from a spiritual, theistic point of view, then the question doesn't even arise, because in the end, God is eternal. And there is no beginning point, there's no end point. And even the universe, the material universe, may have a beginning and an end. And our lives and our physical bodies may have a beginning and an end. But there's a higher reality, which is eternal. So then the question about whether there is something rather than nothing doesn't even come into view, because everything is eternal. Therefore, nothingness is not even an option.
Exactly. And I think it's an absurd idea to say, and I do have this discussion, and I'm finally going to send your book to my son, that he wants scientific proof of everything. And I say, okay, well, there is, you know, you have to look into quantum physics and this and that and the other. And there is a logic, there is a perfect logic for everything. And you can't not have logic if you're removing something. It's like you can't just remove information and say, okay, now I have an argument. So, because this idea of removing God is like, okay, well, you can't argue if you remove completely the evidence, or if there is any, or even the idea itself. So we go at it, and it's quite fun actually, because he's brilliant. There is a chapter called The Paradox and the Foundation of Reality.
Yeah.
The energetic reality. So how did you explore that? And
yeah,
if you want to share.
Well, see, one of the you know, atheists, and of course, again, the book has been written particularly with atheism in mind, you know, as counter arguments. You know, specifically, I was inspired by Richard Dawkins' book, you know, The God Delusion, which I found incredibly unbelievable. I won't say stupid,
pretentious.
because he's
a little bit
not even
pretentious.
that, but so, yeah, so fundamentally, what's the word? Wrong, incorrect.
That's exactly.
Richard Dawkins is, I respect him. He's a highly intelligent man, very educated, but he's also very fundamentally wrong.
Yeah,
and the
you can be
arguments
wrong. Even
also, yeah,
even your intelligent genius person can get it wrong.
Can be completely wrong. Yeah. So with that in mind, I have written about you know, the reality the way it is, and why, with the cosmic fine-tuning argument, why the universe has to be coordinated by an intelligent force. It cannot be otherwise. But at the same time, within reality, there are also things that are problematic, that are contradictory, and sometimes paradoxical. Many examples are there of paradoxical realities. One, for instance, in quantum physics, where scientists have discovered that matter, which has always been thought of as being particleized, you know, atomic or subatomic particles, turns out actually to be an energy field. And they have discovered that matter is simultaneously an energy field and it's a particle. Paradoxically, because in the normal condition, something is either particle or it's a wave. But here we find that it's simultaneously the same, inconceivably almost, paradoxical. And they call this a wavicle, which is a merger of a particle and a wave. Now, this is an example of an inconceivable paradox that by logical estimates would be impossible. But by empirical estimates and empirical reality is real because we observe it. It has been observed in all kinds of scientific experiments, and it's inescapable that that's the case. Quantum physics has been around for more than 100 years, so they've had time to test it and check it. Now, interestingly, and of course in the book at a certain point, I make a connection to Vedic and Vedanta philosophy, and specifically Vaishnava philosophy. And in Vaishnavism, there is this brilliant theory that was propounded by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that reality and that God is achintya, abheda, abheda tattva. He's simultaneously one and different. So on the highest level, we can see that God is manifesting himself in that manner, but that's what is existing on the highest level is also existing on the lower levels, for instance, in the world of matter. So I give a whole list of examples about all kinds of things that we can empirically experience, but yet that are, logically speaking, contradictory or paradoxical. And a simple example is, for instance, time and space. Time, space could be thought of as, if you take a line from A to B, it could be thought of as a set of infinitesimally small points. So an infinite amount of infinitely finite points put together, which forms a line. Now, if you take that approach, there's an ancient Greek kind of story of a Greek philosopher called Zeno, who made a joke out of it. He said that actually a line, if I'm going to have a running contest with, for instance, a tortoise, and the tortoise is going 5 miles an hour, and I'm the runner, I'm going 50 miles an hour. But if the tortoise is 1 meter ahead of me, I will never be able to overtake him. Because by the time that I'm reaching the place where he was, he will have moved a little bit. And by the time that I will have traversed that distance, he will again have moved. So in the end, you get into infinitely smaller sections of space, but you will never be able to overtake him because a line is basically consisting of an infinite number of points. Right. And that's true, but partially it's also not true. A line is also a unity, which is not made of parts, but it's one thing. It's a distance from A to B. So here we are seeing as an example, practical example that we experience in everyday life, how space is simultaneously one and different. And because it's simultaneously one and different, we perceive all kinds of strange things happening with it when we start approaching it from one logical angle and then approaching it from the opposite logical angle, which are both true, but simultaneously, at the same time, they cannot be both true simultaneously. Yet we experience it. I'll give you another example, because I always try to make these complicated topics and to use practical examples to clarify it and to make it
assimilation.
Exactly. Take a sugar cube. A cube of sugar is white and it's sweet. Now, according to Southern philosophy, the question is whether properties and their substance, are they one or different? There are two schools of thought going back to the ancient Greek philosophers. Plato, for instance, stated that a property like sweetness is separate from the underlying substance and it's projected onto the substance. And there was another school of thought called the nominalists. They were of the opinion that a property, the sweetness, and the substance, the sugar, are not separate, but they are one and the same. The problem is that if you take the view of the nominalist that the substance and the properties are identical, one and the same, that would imply that all white things would have to be sweet. Right. But that's not the case, because we also find that there is salt, which is not sweet, of course.
And it's white.
But it's also white. So therefore, a property cannot be 100% identical to its underlying substance. Yet we never see properties that are totally separated from their substance. So they are actually simultaneously one and different. So both Plato was right and the nominalists were right. But yet, logically speaking, it would be impossible. Yet empirically, we are observing it, we are tasting it and proving that that's the case.
Yeah,
which is something we normally never think about. You know, the relation between substance and properties is something, you know, we assume as a given. You know, I'm sitting here behind this desk and it's hard, it's brown, it's made of wood, it's got all kinds of properties, and underneath it there's a substance which carries all these properties. And we never really think about, is
we
there,
just
you know, is there
observe.
a relationship between the two? Yes, there is a
Sure.
relationship between the
Yes,
two.
we just observe, and I think that looking deeper into things, and that's why also I studied the Vedas a little bit, and the idea that uh, let's say God manifests himself in the material platform. I mean, it fascinates me, the idea that God is within every atom, because
Yeah.
it could not exist. So that's the nature of God. So then you say the nature of God, is he personal or impersonal,
Well, that's,
which is another whole amazing subject. But
yeah.
I think for most people it's hard to grasp before you even question, is God personal or impersonal, is the complexity. And there is a chapter, you say, the complexity of consciousness,
Yeah.
because we know there's the body, there is like the table, we can observe all these things, but consciousness, which is not the mind, is something we all have as
Yeah.
in human bodies, even, you know, lower consciousness of other living entities. But explain a little bit how you explore and how you is your
Yeah.
understanding of consciousness, please, because that's, I think people need to understand that before they think, okay,
Right.
now this is consciousness, and what's the connection with the manifestation of God?
Yeah. Well, you know, consciousness is the ultimate mystery of existence. And the reason that we are able to even define reality as a mystery is because we are conscious beings. You know, if we didn't exist as conscious beings, the universe might as well not even exist because there's nobody to observe it. You know, of course, an atheist will say, oh, it doesn't matter. You know, the universe is happy to exist by itself. It doesn't need to be observed by anybody, which is true. But then if you look at the totality of the universe, and at least we know that on one part of the universe, which is planet Earth, there are conscious beings like ourselves that are intelligent, that are conscious, and that are thinking about the universe. So, you know, some philosophers say that consciousness is the universe looking at itself,
And
which
I
is
wanted to
true.
just make a parenthesis there, because that's where quantum physics can come in a very simple way, because I was blown away. I was already studying, but then when consciousness, the bottom line I understood in quantum physics is that when there is an observer,
Observation, then, yeah.
is that,
Well,
but I'm not sure about that. So maybe
there is a mistake about that. You know, in philosophy, we make a distinction between what is called subjective idealism and objective idealism. Idealism doesn't mean idealism in the sense of somebody who wants to help people as an ideal. No, it's not idealistic. Idealism in philosophy is a term that means that the universe is fundamentally made of consciousness. That consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but that rather matter is a byproduct of consciousness. So now the idea in quantum physics, and some quantum physicists have suggested that you know, basically on a subatomic level, reality is undetermined. You know, it's basically a kind of a soup of energy. It doesn't have any shape or form. It's unspecific. It's undetermined, like the impersonal Brahman, as we would say. And they suggest that the undeterminism of the subatomic reality changes the moment that there is a conscious observer that observes that reality. And then all of a sudden, that undetermined soup of subatomic particles turns into, you know, a desk, or, you know, a lampshade, or a human being, or a tooth, or a pair of glasses, or whatever.
Sure.
Now, this, you know, this has led to some paradoxes. The famous one is the Schrodinger paradox of the cat, what is called the cat paradox. I won't go into explaining it because it's a little complicated, cumbersome. But it basically, if the subatomic reality is undetermined, then if you put a cat in certain conditions, he would be simultaneously dead or alive, which is, you know, physically, as we know, impossible. So there is a problem with this interpretation. It's called the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics. And I personally do not agree with it, because basically it states that individual observers are actually the creators of the universe around them.
I see.
And
I
that's
see.
not true, because obviously I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my room and my desk and I'm looking at you, and things are the way they are. And
Not
you know,
creating it
maybe
as
I
you
don't
go.
like the color on the wallpaper, and I wish and imagine a different color, and then by the power of my consciousness I should be able to change it, which doesn't happen. So you know, the world would be much more easy to live in if we can just, by the power of our consciousness and our desire, change everything to the way that we would prefer it, and that doesn't happen. So there is
It
an
doesn't happen
objective.
instantaneously. That's what I'm thinking also. There is like, you can desire and then you can manifest it by
Right.
changing it, but it's not like I look at it and it's like, you know,
No, yeah, of course, yeah. Through desire and concerted, consistent action, you can achieve certain things. You know, if I don't like the color of the wall, then I have to go to a shop and buy some paint and you know,
exactly.
start painting it and work hard, and it will change. But I have to
True.
do a lot of work for that. It doesn't
Exactly.
happen automatically. So the idea of objective idealism is that yes, matter is a transformation of energy, and energy fundamentally is identical to consciousness. You know, this is the Vedic paradigm of a narrative of Sat Chit Ananda, you know, eternal existence, pure consciousness and knowledge and pure bliss. So actually energy is made of that on the most fundamental level. Energy is Sat Chit Ananda. That objective consciousness, supreme consciousness, yes, that's God, who is actually creating the universe and creating all the things in it and maintaining it. So from that point of view, quantum physics is right. God looking at things, whether he's looking at it or doing something else to create it, we don't know. It's a mysterious process how God exists and how he creates the universe, but he has that creative power. So it's the creative power in the end, and that's what quantum physics is talking about. You know, the creative power that makes things happen, but not just happen kind of in a random, chaotic manner, but happen in a highly intelligent, sophisticated manner, so that things actually function and work. So that's the
Not an
big mystery.
accident.
Not an accident, coming back to the beginning point of
Sure.
our discussion, that
Yeah.
you know, the complexity of the universe is so imaginably great that there's no way that could have happened by accident. You know, coming back to these four forces and having the right
Yes, amazing.
values in relationship to one another. So this is where you can see that, you know, quantum physics and objective idealism, which is basically the foundation of Vaishnava Vedanta philosophy, how they come together.
Yes, that's an exploration. So I think I'm exploring the consciousness first, because many persons are seeking, you know, the whole new age movement, which is huge. And where we are here, there's a lot of artists and people, they're really seeking because they want to know. But it's so confusing because they think their consciousness is their mind, and then, you know, they don't have the knowledge that there are different parts of existence. So I'd like to hear what you think about, because you have a whole chapter called God and Reason, the scientific foundation of the existence of God. So how scientifically can you explain in simple words?
Yeah, well, God and Reason is also a bit of an historical overview of religion and how institutional religions like Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam, how have they functioned? You know, they've been around for some time, and so we can tell what their historical impact has been. Now, the problem with Western religions particularly is that they were born out of, you know, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they were born out of the book we call the Bible, of course, which is a narrative, the history of particularly the Jewish people, but also before that, the creation of the universe, you know, in Genesis. So the problem is that the Bible and Christianity and Judaism, they were not religions that had a philosophical system of their own. So by the time that Christianity was created with the birth of Jesus about 2,000 years ago, they were existing within the Roman Empire. And the dominant culture in the Roman Empire was the Greek culture. The Romans were basically, administrators and fighters and so on. The
Sure.
Greeks, they were the intellectuals of the whole crew.
Sure.
They had their philosophers and, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and so on. So Christianity, in order to spread itself and to make it acceptable to the Roman culture, integrated Greek philosophy into the Christian theology. And that's what became what we call today Christianity. But actually, it's really a merger of Greek philosophy and biblical narratives. And there's been a lot of resistance against that because, Greek philosophy didn't come from the Bible. It didn't come from Adam and Eve or from Abraham or from any of the other historical biblical figures, but it came from a hedonistic source. So there was a lot of resistance against it. But on the other hand, they had no choice because they didn't have a philosophy of their own. So within Christianity, there's been a strong resistance from the beginning, and I always quote the church father, not Godfather, the church father, Tertullian, who said, "I believe because it's absurd." And so this idea that reason and the human mind is an instrument that can work in favor of religion was rejected. In fact, many times it was seen to be a workshop of the devil.
Yeah,
Human
like
intelligence.
you just believe and you don't question it, and you just
exactly. You just have
faith.
faith and you just surrender. You switch off your mind because the intelligence is something that makes people proud. It's an instrument of the ego, and it can delude you, it take you away from God. Martin Luther said, that the mind is the whore of the devil, or the intellect is the whore of the devil. So here you go. Not exactly flattering towards what we call intelligence. And here is the difference with the Vedic point of view. Atato Brahma Jigyasa, which states that, because we have a human form of life, we have the intelligence and the capability distinguishing us from the animal and lower species of life to try to understand God, at least by intellectual means. So in the Vedas, the intellect and the reason is considered to be a positive energy. Of course, it can be abused for sure, but it's
necessary to grasp.
Exactly. So in the Vedanta doctrine, you'll find that there are three sources of valid knowledge, which is sense experience, pratyaksa, anumana, which is logic and reason, and shabda, which is mystic experience and scripture. So these three are all equal in a way. They're all compatible, they're complementary. And this has not been the case in the Western religions. And that's why we've seen that in the Western religions, particularly, there has been this dichotomy, this fight between religion and science, and which came to the head at the end of the Middle Ages, during the beginning of the scientific revolution. Many scientists were either arrested or executed. Famous is Galileo. I quote, I tell that story in the book, how he was prosecuted by the church and he was arrested, and he was forced to recant his statements about the structure of the solar system. And another philosopher, Bruno Gordiano, who was put on he was burned alive because he was claiming that the universe was infinite, and that was against what they considered biblical revelation. So he had to,
and the whole witch hunting. I didn't mean to interrupt, but the whole witch hunting also, it was any mystics, anybody trying to explore the senses and utilize any mystic power that we do have, we could have if we really wanted to with the consciousness. They were also persecuted because it was outside Christian idea that you just believe in faith, you don't explore anything, just do as I say, right?
Exactly. Many, you had the Gnostic traditions were basically remnants of Vedic culture that believed in reincarnation and karma. They were prosecuted or persecuted. Many who were holding views that was not exactly in line with the official church doctrine, they were considered enemies and they were also eliminated.
Sure.
If a woman turned out to be too light, she was considered a witch, and she could be burned at the
Yeah.
stake just for being underweight, and maybe you were suffering from
Crazy.
anorexia or something like that.
Sure.
The punishment in the
Some
Middle Ages,
standards, double
you
standards as
get
well.
burned at a stake, for being anorexic.
Oh my
So
God, I didn't know
uh,
that.
there's a lot of superstition that was going on,
Exactly.
and it was violent because the church not only was a religious organization, it became politically powerful, and they had every interest in order to keep everyone in line, and
Control.
to to squash any disobedience or any deviation. So it was terrible. Yeah, terrible.
Control. Yeah, it was a lot of, that's why I think a lot of people steer today out of this whole religion idea,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they it was a tool for control, and it was
yeah,
so deadly that a lot of people just
exactly.
rebel against it. So that's a point that I think it's important to make.
Yeah,
It's that
but that's
religion is not and and God is not a like a old man on a cloud just telling you now now you're gonna
yeah,
pay for
sending everyone to
eternity.
hell. Yeah, yeah. Now, no, that's why that chapter dealing with God and reason is talking about that, and also about the danger of institutionalized but sectarian religion. That is inclined towards fundamentalism. I mean, that's dangerous, really
Ve-
dangerous.
Very dangerous.
So what I'm proposing is, enlightened religion. There's the scientific basis that God is existing. So now, of course, Vaishnavism is a beautiful vehicle of enlightened religion. So
Absolutely.
you don't have to invent it. It's already there.
Yes.
But
And
still,
you don't have to be stupid either. It's like you can actually think, you can actually question, you can actually
that's the
have
whole
the
point.
experience, right?
That's the whole point. That's in the Indian tradition. If there was a disagreement, you would debate one another. And if one person came out victorious out of the debate and the other one was defeated, he would humbly submit himself to the victor to become his disciple and to accept the other
Exactly.
person as his guru.
And learn more and learn more. Yes.
And
So,
learn more. Yeah. So the idea is that, knowledge is not something that can only, of course, we need sources of knowledge. None of us, everything that I'm saying now, it's not something that I have invented. I've learned it in school and read books, and then I've listened to Prabhupada, my spiritual master, and he, of course, all the
and
knowledge we
his
get
line, the teacher
we
is
are not
amazing.
we're not the creators of it, but at the
No.
same time we have to absorb it, digest it, and understand it. So to understand it, you have to go deep into it, and you have to question it, and challenge it. So that's the process by which knowledge is actually created, and also spiritual knowledge has to work in the same way. If knowledge is only a matter of somebody dictating to you what to believe, and you don't have the ability to internalize it and fully understand it, then it actually becomes useless.
Yes, and then there's the experiencing of it. It's also like the intellectual, the intellect trying to grasp the idea, but then the consciousness will experiment the bliss and the love and all these emotions that are
Yeah,
actually there. And you cannot measure emotion, you cannot mathematically pinpoint, but everybody's feeling it. It's not
yeah,
something we can even explain. So I think in the emotional level, a lot of people got really burned out with this dictatorial,
yeah.
religious ideals. And now the new age movement that, sometimes is a little bit out of whack with the,
Well, yeah, the problem with the New Age movement is not certainly not organized or institutionalized religion, but it's also
it's a little bit out of
totally,
whack.
it's all over the place.
Yeah, it's all over, like
From
whatever.
flying
The
to
truth is
flying
my truth.
saucers
And
to the
yeah.
most crazy conspiracy theories that you can imagine.
And then
So
my truth is the ultimate truth. So I think it's important to realize that scientifically and through the consciousness we can actually understand, assimilate, and question that there is something that has created this amazing universe, is mathematically proving that otherwise that is not a possibility. So
right,
that a lot of people should question that. And then emotionally you can actually experience
Yeah.
what love is, what compassion is, and all these things that we all have. And we don't want to see a world full of wars and famines and all these things. It's a natural thing,
No, of
the
course not.
human conscious. So
Of course.
there is a beauty in there. So,
Yeah.
so just to maybe wrap, because there's so many paradoxes and we could go on for like 2 days. So you the last chapter, I mean, I don't know, maybe you don't want to give it all like here, because people, I want them to buy your book. But the destination, so if we are here and time and space, and we are of a higher consciousness, I mean, we can achieve higher consciousness, but we are not material beings. There is something else happening. So you say there is a destination. How would you describe a destination? Being eternal beings existing here and now, how can we grasp? Is there a goal? Is there a place we should be that it's not here? We are not going to be here in the body forever.
Well,
so we are going somewhere.
yeah. So there's one point that we kind of jumped over a little bit, which is the chapter 7, which is the problem of the theodicy, the problem of evil.
That's very
Yeah.
important. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, atheists have several arguments, but the actual scientific arguments, like the fine-tuned universe, which is called the teleological argument traditionally, that's very, very powerful. And it eliminates atheism. However, atheists have a really powerful argument of their own, which is, okay, let's say God exists and he's all powerful and he's all good. Why does he create a universe that is so imperfect, that is so full of suffering from a human perspective? He might expect that he is benign and that he doesn't want us to live in hellish conditions, perfect world. This is really an essential question, and Vaishnava philosophy gives a really compelling explanation. And the explanation is that precisely because of consciousness, God is a conscious being, and we are part of God. And we have the same qualitative identity of being conscious beings as well. But one of the features of consciousness is an element of independence. If you're not independent and you're not able to make choices and have multiple, objects for observation that you can choose from, and actions that you can take and that you can contemplate either to do this or to do that. Our lives are full of choices, and consciousness is fundamentally independent individuality confronted with millions of choices.
That's the free will. The free will, that is a
that
very
is the free,
generous idea.
exactly. That is the free will. So when the universe, and let's say the creation itself, which is eternal, but let's say it was created, we are part of that creation, and the part of a creation always has to realize that I'm part of the creation, but there are also other parts, and all these parts, they are basically working together. That's why we call it a creation, and we don't call it a mess. It's the difference between an organized creation and a chaos. So creation is not a chaos, it's organized. But it also implies that every part of the creation, including us as conscious individuals, we have to also comply with the rules of the cosmic order. Now, some living beings in a certain phase in their existence decided they want to enlarge their independence. They are not satisfied just being in a loving relationship with God and experiencing his love and beauty and being satisfied that way. But we like a little different. God has many different attributes, and one of them is his beauty and his love. The other one is his power and his energy, which is also very attractive. So in the end, there is a tension between these two, you could say, extreme qualities on the same spectrum of qualities of God. There is a bit of tension, because when you love someone, you're totally dedicated to that person, and you forget about yourself. You're completely absorbed in the object of love. But when you have power, when you see power, it's a different dynamic. When you have power, it actually focuses you on the ego and the self. You would like to have that power to play with it,
Sure.
control it.
experience.
So when we desire, when we get more attracted to the power aspect of God rather than God himself, that's when there is a danger we can drift away into a realm which we call the material world. Now, the difference also is, and I sum it up into one statement that says that it's the difference between the power of love versus the love for power.
Oh,
So
Bob Marley said something like that.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm not the first one who
Bobby,
can.
yeah, he was.
I read it, heard it, and
Yeah. No, of
it
course,
really
it's a
beautifully
beautiful thing. Yes.
beautifully sums up. Prabhupada would always say that we are all attracted to Krishna. But the difference is that there are those who are directly attracted to Krishna and those who are indirectly attracted, who are attracted to the energies of Krishna. So in the material world, we try to enjoy the energies of Krishna, and we find these energies sometimes overwhelmingly attractive, beautiful, powerful, whatever. It could be fame, it could be richness, it could be wealth, it could be success, it could be health, it could be knowledge, it could be power, being the greatest conqueror, the Stalin or whatever. So we are all attracted to Krishna, yet there is a distinction between being directly connected or being attracted to his energies. So living entities in their cosmic eternal existence, at a certain point, they can decide to take a detour. And the detour is the realm whereby we try to experience a greater independence, by the way, which is not immediately wrong, because according to Vedic philosophy, the upper part of the universe, the heavenly planets, they are pretty much the same as the spiritual world. So it's not that the moment you enter into the material world, immediately you're in hell. No, the upper part of the material world and all the demigods, they're basically administrators using their power in the service of Krishna, which is fine. So you can enjoy a little extra with that power, but be careful not to.
The consciousness needs to be connected, right?
Not to abuse it. And this is where the danger comes in. And it's a very gradual process. I call it gradualism. We don't fall down immediately from Vaikuntha right into Auschwitz, or to a level of a bacteria. No, we go through a slow process whereby we first of all are in a position of great power, Lord Brahma. And with
degrading, it's like a degrading, almost like in a military level. It's like you can be like the general or Indra or the demigod, and then you by your consciousness you degrade.
The problem with power is that it's a little bit self-centered and therefore a little bit intoxicating. And when we get carried away, rather than using the power, we start abusing it. And the moment you abuse it, the abuse is what causes suffering to other living beings. And then karma is created. Then karma comes into the picture. And that's when we enter into the lower regions of the material universe and we become subjected to the laws of karma. Because we are causing suffering to other beings, we are abusing our power, and we will have to experience that suffering ourselves to reestablish, the balance in the cosmic order.
Yeah, so the wheel of life as well. There's a beautiful Vedic idea of that. There's the wheel of life and how you can get degraded or upgraded.
Right, and it's a conscious decision at every moment. Our free will is always there. However, when we get too much, when we fall down too much, at a certain point, even our free will, at least temporarily, is taken away. When you're entering into the lower species of life, like the plant or the animal kingdom, your free will is gone. You're living life through the laws of nature and following just purely the instincts that are given. Also, by the way, by divine power. If you see the actions of animals, it's inconceivable how a bird can fly 5,000 kilometers from the north to the south and end up in the right place without radar, without any instrument or GPS or somebody helping her. Okay, now you have to turn right and now you turn left.
But that's the magic of that consciousness.
We call it instinct, but what is instinct? It's for innovators explained it's the super soul guiding, these creatures. Sure. Until we come back to the human form of life, and we are then repossessing our free will and our ability to discriminate, the atato brahma jigyasa, the human form of life, we have intelligence. We are able to start distinguishing again between good and evil, what's right and wrong, and how to make a progressive move towards spiritual rejuvenation, or go back down again to something less elevated.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to this, because I think it's very important, is that when a consciousness is altered by drugs, and alcohol is a very dangerous thing, because now even if you have you have the consciousness of the human body, but you cannot make decisions that are proper if you are in an ulterior place. It's not clear. It's like having, like me without glasses. It's
blurred state of consciousness.
So the free will can only be completely used if you're sober, really.
Yeah. No, that's why, one of the beauties of, Vedic philosophy is that not only do they provide this beautiful metaphysical philosophy that's totally logical, philosophical, scientific, but it also gives you a practical method of how to deal with this process of elevating your consciousness. The process of Bhakti Yoga, the sadhana bhakti, where you follow certain rules and you discipline yourself and you purify yourself. That is extremely important, because then your ability to make the right decisions only increase.
Exactly.
And your temptation towards making the wrong decisions will be decreasing. Yes. So there's a method for that, we call it spiritual life, spiritual practice.
It's practicing every day and every moment, and I think that's very important, because a lot of people look for that, but they just don't understand that there is, there's the laws of nature. There's the laws of nature. It will apply to everybody at all times. You can't deny it. If you drop a rock, it will fall to the ground, and that's the science, and it ties to the beginning. So what about the destination? Tell us briefly about the destination.
So the destination in the end is, we all came from Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, because we are eternal. We were never created. So we are eternal beings. And at a certain point, we decided to try to expand our independence, being attracted to this aspect of power. After an experience of who knows how many lifetimes, could be millions of lifetimes, we finally come to the realization that this has not been a smart move. And we get tired of the suffering in this world, and we are looking for going back to where we came from, which is Vaikuntha, which literally means the place without suffering, without anxiety. And that's what we, maybe in other religions, they would call it heaven, or they would nirvana. There are many names for it. In the Vedanta philosophy, in Vaishnava Vedanta, it's called Vaikuntha. It's a spiritual world. The Mayavadis, the impersonalists, the Advaitins would talk about Brahman, or merging into a state of pure energy and losing our individuality. The Vedas, they actually say that is a form of liberation, but it's not the highest form of liberation. The highest form of liberation is actually to regain your eternal spiritual individuality as a person, and to have an eternal
change
relationship with the supreme being of which we are a part, and therefore intimately and eternally connected. So the spiritual world, I mean, I found it very, because before I became a devotee, I was very much into Mayavadi philosophy, and I was talking about, we all merge, we become one. And of course, I could never explain that why, if we are God, why are we here? If I'm God, I'd like to change and get out of here right away. I can think of many other places. Right. So, or make it perfect. Yeah. So, the Vaishnava conclusion is that personality is actually the highest principle. It's the highest state of reality, and the impersonal also exists, but it's subordinate to the personal, because the personal is where it all comes together in the supreme person, and we are all finite expansions of that supreme person, finite in space, but not finite in time. We are also eternal. Wonderful. Yet we are quantitatively limited in terms of space. And that's why there is a distinction between us and God. So our point in the end is to return there to that spiritual world, because we came from there. And it's a place where it's our natural condition, where we are eternally happy, satisfied, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And by the way, it's not a place that is boring, because many people say, oh my God, eternal life. I'm glad I'm dying, because I couldn't imagine living eternally. Well, then you haven't fully understood yet what means spiritual consciousness. And of course, I haven't understood that fully either, so I don't want to pretend. Philosophically, there is a state of consciousness where our emotions are so fulfilled with what we call ecstatic experiences of unbelievable, I mean, we all have moments in our lives that we taste something when listen to some beautiful music, and you become ecstatic. Oh my God, I wish I could feel this feeling all the time.
Forever.
So multiply that by a few 100 million times, and then you can try to imagine the ecstatic experiences that a soul would have in the spiritual world. And these ecstatic experiences are not just temporary, they are permanent. They're perpetual. It's hard for us to imagine that.
Yeah.
But rest assured, it's not boring.
Yeah. And I wanted to tie this with the Cine tribe and the things we are exploring here, and this amazing place, is that, making cinema, making movies, that is our profession. They had this movie Matrix that was huge, and it was the idea of like how to get out of this matrix.
Right.
And it was a good analogy. I was a bit frustrated because at the end of that movie, I loved that movie at the time. And then Neo says, I will tell you how to get out. And they never did. And I was thinking, when I came across the Vedic knowledge, I say, well, they just don't have the information. What do you think about that?
Yeah, right. I've seen the movie too. It's already, I think, 20 years ago. So it's a long time ago. I don't remember exactly the ending. But yeah, I thought it was fascinating, and all the effects that they were using, and showing basically the material world as a computer simulated illusion, and not the material world, because they were not talking about it in those terms, but the reality that we're living in, that's actually one computer simulated illusion. So in fact, Maya, as it's described in the Vedas, the material world is like that. It's in a way a computer simulation created by a spiritual computer in the spiritual world, to enable living beings to move away from reality and temporarily be placed in this world where they can try to achieve great power and enjoy their independence and their.
It's like a mirror, no? It's like a mirror, like it. Yeah. I thought it's and it says in the Vedanta.
It's a perverted reflection. They compare it to a banyan tree, with the roots upside down. There's
exactly, which is
comparison in the Bhagavad Gita about that.
Yeah. So we are creating this venue here, Cine Tribe, to create content, retreats, education. It's a brilliant idea. It's on its way. And I wanted to tie it with the Matrix, because I thought that was a little drop in the ocean of like, wow, something else is happening, and the illusion. And our company, as you know, Yoga Maya Films, you know what Yoga Maya means. And we want to help as many people as we can to remove this curtain, the curtain of illusion, to see what's really behind it, like the Wizard of Oz. So cinema is a great tool to do these things, because it goes straight into the subconscious mind. People leave behind their preconceptions when they go watch a movie. They don't take all their stuff with them. They kind of sit there and they want to be entertained. So it's such a great tool to go beyond and say, okay, transformation, immediate transformation, because they left their preconceptions behind and they're just watching. So we wanted to share that with you as well, because writing these books, and also when we are ready here, we would love to have you come, to give a seminar, give a nice talk, and go into the Caribbean Sea and get some sun and, have a good time.
I've been in that part of Mexico before, and it was very, I remember it, and looking at you now, some palm trees in the back. I'm sitting in my office. I'm sitting in my office here, but if you look out the window, you'll see it's dark, it's wet.
It's night cold already. But you have your drums. I can see your drums there.
Yeah.
The drum set. I used to
Yes,
do.
my drum set is right here in the
Oh,
background.
I love it. I love it. So are you practicing?
I practice every day. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Awesome.
And I take classes as well from a local drummer
Great.
here
Great.
who's really, really.
Do you do jazz? Do you do jazz drumming? A little
I've
bit?
started to practice some jazz drumming as well, which is extremely much more sophisticated and difficult
Yes,
than
yes.
straightforward rock drumming.
Yeah,
But
we are planning to have a Cine Tribe Café Teatro here as a window to the venue in the jungle, and we are going to have a piano and a drum set for jamming, a little jazz, a little.
fantastic.
That would be great. So we're gonna
And
have.
you make it even more attractive for me to come over and
I'm
to
telling you.
do
This is it.
a jam session.
Yes, no, this is it. We have a great plan, and it's been thought out, as you know, for so many years that it's like it's almost like a puzzle. A big puzzle has come together, and
Right.
how to actually operate it and make it successful in the material world, because it can be in your mind and in your desire and your wishing, and but to make it practical to actually function is a complete different thing. So
Right.
it's finally the whole picture is there, and I'll
Yeah.
share with you, and we will talk more. But I know it's getting late for you, and
No, it's
I
only, what is it? It's only 20 past 6.
oh yeah,
No, 20 past 5 in the afternoon. No, it's okay.
oh yeah,
It
yeah,
looks
we
late
start
because it's
early.
dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we start early. So is
Yeah.
there anything else you want to share with us? You want to leave with us? Like, let's say, let's use my son, for example, confused 26-year-old, adorable person who has achieved great things already, but who has bought into the idea. I think it's a scientific atheism, I believe. I would
Yeah.
call that. So what would you say to this kind of personalities?
Well, look, I'm totally pro science. I love science because science now has given us the tool, the most convincing tools since modern history, let's say history for the last few thousand years, to actually scientifically prove that God must exist. I mean, that was, up until a few hundred years ago, totally, although they had strong arguments like the teleological argument, but then Darwin came along and, evolution made it less likely that there was a need for a creator. But in the last 30 years, science has unraveled the universe to such a level of sophistication, at such depth, both on a level of particle physics, as well as on a macro level, with like a Hubble telescope that can pierce into deep space and see things that before were just totally unknown. We thought that, there was only one galaxy, which is the Milky Way. Now we know that there are billions of galaxies that are comprised of billions of stars. At least we know that the universe is massive and that it's exceedingly complex. And that complexity requires an explanation. And science can give that explanation now, except they don't have the ultimate answer. But the ultimate answer is that there is a source of information and intelligence and consciousness that must stand at the basis of this universal creation. So if you're open-minded and seriously studying science, you will come to that conclusion. It's unavoidable and it's inevitable. Doesn't mean all the scientists now all of a sudden become theistically minded, because there are still arguments, the theosophy, the theodicy argument I mentioned before, the problem of evil is still there, and it's not easy to explain because it takes a bit of, another jump, but it's a different mindset to be able, but once you understand that God must exist, the next step of explaining why it is that our relationship with God can be complicated. When we start understanding that our consciousness and our individuality implies a certain degree of independence and free will, once we start accepting that that's inalienable, you could say that if we didn't have, could have God created a universe where this could not have happened, did not have free will, where abuse then we would not exist, because the essence of our existence is that we are conscious beings. And as conscious beings, by definition, we have a degree of independence. So you can't have it any other way. So you can ask the question, like smart people say, can God make a square circle? Yeah, he can make a square circle. Then we will end up calling all the circles squares and calling all the squares circles, But in the end, God cannot do something. God cannot do something which is irrational. He can do something which is inconceivable, but not something which is irrational. So a square circle is irrational. The fact that we are simultaneously one and different from God, the fact that we are simultaneously one and different from God, and that we have an independence, that is inconceivable, yet we observe it, it's true. So once we accept that it's either a choice to exist or not, but if you exist, there is a small chance that you want to use your independence a little too much. And that can make you drift away from, the spiritual world and end up in the situation that we are now. But it's inalienable. Our consciousness and our independence is an inalienable property from our existence as an individual.
Yeah, it's interesting also, I just wanted to add that it is independence that depends also, in a way.
Yes.
It's
not
like
totally,
I'm independent to choose, but I'm fully dependent of what's happening, because I cannot just free myself. It's not that I can just be, okay, unplug, It's not like that. It's like this independence of choice in a depending way, which is also beautiful. Wonderful.
Yeah, if our independence were unlimited, then we would effectively be God. God is the only one who's totally 100% independent, because he is everything. So then you are independent. We are not.
I'm a little bit jealous.
We are not everything. We are part of everything, along with many other parts of everything, and these parts all have to work together. Just like, in society, we have to work together. We follow rules, we follow laws.
Yeah, the harmony.
We are therefore, the choice is whether we want to act in harmony with the cosmic order, or whether we want to create our own cosmic order.
Exactly. The harmony is what we seek for, actually, deep down, I think, in the material world. Well, thank you so much, Henk. It's been a pleasure. Hari,
it was a real pleasure talking to you and seeing you again after so many years, at least digitally.
Yes, but we will make plans. So when you can visit us, we would love to have you here so you can see for yourself.
It looks fantastic, beautiful. I'd love to come there.
Broadcasting, and teaching and sharing and having delicious vegetarian food and wonderful drumming sessions and dancing and singing and all of that. So we are here. We can't wait. And let's get together. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
And
thank you too.
Have a lovely evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Bye.